Okay, this is Ray from Fni. I'm just testing this. We will have Declan Lowney, Paul Butler Lennox, and Paul Webster hosting this chat shortly. So do bear with us. Thank you.
Hey folks, it's Paul here from Filmmakers Ireland. If you can just sit tight with us, we're going to be going live fairly shortly. We're just waiting for some more people to jump on because there are some people are having some issues just navigating the sign in. So yeah, sit tight. We'll be back with you shortly. Now there's 13, 14. Just jumping on again. There's Paul now. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Wonderful. We're just waiting for Declan there, and then we'll be ready to go.
Great.
Hey, say Paul, did you get your hair cut?
I did.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, I butchered myself for anybody that.
Just... Huh?
Yeah, there's a couple of people watching there. We're just waiting for Declan to log in, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll. Sorry about this, guys. We're also waiting for other people to actually just log in properly. So just bear with us there, and then we'll be ready to go. Feel free to use the chat box there on the right to say hello and introduce yourself if you haven't so far. Also, keep an eye out for our podcasts, our two most recent podcasts. Over the last couple of weeks, we had our special 100th episode with highlights from Fni Rapture over the last 2 years. And we have, who did we have? We had
Joe Farley on last week, and then Joe Marta, who was the writer on Calm with Horses. So that's this week's episode. Lovely fella. So yeah, two really good episodes. Hugh Farley, great person to listen to at this time. He knows a lot about the broadcasters and the industry and all that stuff. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, finger on the pulse, and very much, very certainly someone who's very versed in terms of the overall operating structures, in terms of the guilds, and a big cog in the machine overall. Very experienced individual. So check that one out. And as Paul said, Joe Morta, who was nominated as a Variety Star of Tomorrow a couple of years ago, and he's currently working on a feature screenplay which Michael Fassbender is attached to star in. So that should be really interesting. Paul, I'm just going to nip off there for a second to see if I can assist anybody else there before we get going proper. Okay?
Okay, cool.
Hi, Paul Webster. I can see you. I'm just going to push live there with the video chat of you inside the room. Is that okay to push that live to Facebook page? And you can just say hello to everybody. Okay, you're live.
Hello. How is everyone out there? We're just waiting on Declan and Paul Butler Lennox to come through. There is Paul Butler Lennox. How are you doing?
How are you?
Both of us with our homemade haircuts.
Look at that. Look at the hack of that. Quite literally the hack of that.
I didn't do my own one. My girlfriend did one. I think she did a pretty good job.
She did a much better job than I did, because you can still look at the. It's not faded at all. It's not faded in at all.
Bert and Ernie-esque.
Yeah, big beaker head on me. So everybody who's on the Facebook group, you're very welcome along to the second or third Fni Home online event. We're really excited about this. Next week we have Frank Berry. Frank Berry directed Michael Inside and I Used to Live Here, and also the documentary Ballymun Lullaby, if anybody has seen that. So he's a filmmaker, director, writer, director, and an educator who still very much works teaching up and coming filmmakers as well in Coláiste. Great story, kind of where he's got to over the last couple of years, and quite literally one of the nicest people and the most supportive and encouraging people you can imagine. So that will be this week, next Wednesday. So tune in for that. We'll be putting up the link to register tomorrow morning. So yeah, cool. How's Paul Webster getting on?
Good. Yeah, writing away. Kind of trying to prepare for when things get back. I have a couple of projects that hopefully will still be okay, and just trying to get ready for them, and then writing my feature script. First feature script I've written in about 5 years. So yeah, I'm doing my 10 pages a day, and that is going quite well. So I just started doing that last week. So I don't know why I never thought of it before, but the 10 pages a day is quite achievable. And yeah, so like I'm up at page 40 already. So I'd recommend anyone who's maybe struggling, some sort of quota or something like that might be a good method for them.
Okay. Yeah, so discipline and little and often kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, after 2 weeks, I should have it'll be a vomit draft. It'll be rough, very rough, but then I have something to work with then.
Okay. Now, I'll just see where Declan is there.
Where is Declan?
There's Declan. In true Father Ted style, we're delayed.
Do you remember that Tommy Tiernan video?
Which one is that now?
It was your man Declan, his friend Declan did a marathon. Where is Declan?
Declan!
He was kidding me.
Where is Declan? Sorry about this, guys. Just bear with us. Now, I'm just going to nip off there for a sec. Paul, say nice things about filmmaking.
Hi.
Oh,
Declan,
bingo.
how are you doing?
I'm good. I could see the two of you and hear you rabbiting on there.
All right, we couldn't see you.
Thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. Ladies and gents, we're joined by filmmaker and all-around Wexford under-11 champion from 1974. Probably a bit after that. Declan Lowney, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. I never hurled in my life. I hated GA at school. And we had Christian brothers who used to kick the shit out of us if we didn't play, and I hated it. It was always cold. And I was yeah, we're not a good sporty family.
Hence filmmaking then.
Hence filmmaking.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, we'll just kind of go back to the start and just kind of, I suppose, talk about the foundations or the seeds that were planted early on in you to become a filmmaker. What kind of were your earliest memories of film?
Well, it was a funny route. My uncle Tony, who bless him, just died last week, and he was the last of my dad's family, my dad's brother Tony. But Tony was a very extravagant character. My dad had a dance band, and that had kind of finished by the time I was born. I'm one of 6, and I'm at the lower end. So my older brothers and sisters had a whole life before I came along. But my dad had a dance band, and his dad and 2 of his brothers were in the dance band. And Tony was a very flamboyant guy with a glittery jacket, the top hat, the saxophone. And he traveled a lot, and he was a chef. And he came back home with the Super 8 camera when I was 10 or 11. And he had visions of, founding the Wexford Miniature Movie Makers Society or something like that. And he made a vampire movie when I was 11. And I was just in awe of the whole thing. And I recently found it and found the cassette tapes of the audio, and I had it restored and telecinied and graded, and we had all the sound sunk up. And it was quite an achievement for 1971 in Wexford, given that he'd never done anything like that before. But I was blown away by the notion that you could make a film in Wexford. And as an 11-year-old, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And the camera came home and it was never used again, so I started fooling around with it and doing very simple stop frame animation and entering film competitions, and I won a prize, and I thought, this is definitely what I want to do. So I mean, I fell in love with the idea of doing it rather than that I particularly wanted to make films about a certain thing per se, but I just loved the idea. And so I made Super 8 films when I was a teenager, and that's why I didn't play hurling.
Great. In terms of, was there a point, was there a kind of light switch moment when you stopped kind of playing around with the toys, when you realized that you wanted to actually be a filmmaker? Was there a moment where things kind of clicked for you and went, oh, okay, maybe I can do this?
Well, I'm still not sure if I'm even doing it, to be honest. I mean, the thing is, I made films all through teenage years. I didn't drink, I didn't go to pubs, I didn't do anything. I was a bit fucking nerdy, to be honest. And I badgered RT to get a job, and they let me in. I'd worked for a year in Dublin as a runner in an editing house, and I worked for Tiernan McBride, and he helped me get some film stock, and I made a short film about pirate radio, and it was called Wavelength. And that won a prize at the Cork Film Festival. And it was screened at the what was the Irish Film Centre a few times. And I remember seeing it there on the big screen going, fuck, this is amazing when the lights go down. Just that, and I mean, the film's very crude if you look at it now, but it had Portrait of Dublin by a Wexford fella at the age of 18 in 1978, with pirate radio as the backdrop and as the glue to putting the whole thing together. And it had a thing about it. And there was a buzz in the audience where people went, oh, fuck, that's Dublin. And people recognizing themselves and their landscape, I guess. And I remember thinking, that's brilliant that you can do that in a darkened room. But I went into RT instead and trained in the film editing department. But it was, so I got a job in RT at 19. And so, really, I felt I'd gotten where I wanted to go. And then you learn more and you go, fuck, I could be doing that. I could do that. And the one thing about editing, particularly with film editing, directors went out to shoot a bunch of stuff, and it was like a 10-minute piece for a kids show maybe you're doing, and they shoot 4 hours of film or whatever, and you sit there going, put it together and learning how to edit, learning the craft of editing and the storytelling aspect of editing, and going, look, as a fucking director, you do need this and you need that, but you don't need that. And why didn't you get that? Because that's what I really need to cut the thing together. So you really got an understanding of how to do it wrongly and how maybe you could do it correctly. And so I think coming out of editing was a brilliant way of learning all that stuff. And so I got very itchy in editing department, and I was there 5 years, and I applied for a job as a producer director. They had a producer director course every 5 or 6 years at RTE, and a new intake of people would come in, and they were supposed to be gifted and talented and shit. And half the places would go to internal candidates and half them would go to external candidates. So I got the gig, and I was very young. I was 24 when I trained to be a director. And Billy McGrath, who you interviewed recently, was a fellow colleague, and Jerry Stembridge. Oh. So it was the class of 84. So I was a producer director in RTE and thought, this is fucking brilliant. But because I was young, they made me do kids shows and music and stuff like that. So I quickly developed an aptitude for doing multi-camera live to air music and TV. And that culminated in me doing the Eurovision Song Contest in 1988. And then I got out of RTE. I think I realized it was like wanting to be a writer, but ended up being writing for a newspaper when you wanted to be a novelist. It was that RT was brilliant. I learned so much, but TV was a kind of a distraction. you know, and live TV wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be doing drama and particularly comedy. So yeah. Oh, Paul, I can't hear you now.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Which I suppose is a good time to ask, how are you finding working in this capacity online like this?
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, my last job was a commercial that I shot in Atlanta, and I was based in Los Angeles. So all the casting was done remotely. A lot of the recce's, the tech scare, a lot of that stuff was done remotely because it started, you know, people realized they maybe shouldn't be traveling quite so much. So, I mean, I'm used to, I've done quite a bit of casting remotely. It's, you know, there is something about casting, about being in the room and being able to see the person, meet the actor face to face. And if you don't get a chance to do that until the first day of the shoot, that can be very frustrating. But otherwise, I quite like the remote thing. It's nice. Yeah. You don't have to get out of bed. I could be wearing shorts. I'm not.
What can you tell us about that project at this stage?
It was my first American commercial. It was a commercial for the Georgia Lottery Commission, and they were for scratch cards, or scratchers as they call them. Yeah. It really wasn't. It was an ordinary job, but it was my first proper American commercial with American people speaking American.
And how long have you been doing ads? Have you always
I've been doing ads for 20 years, but I've been desperately trying to do it in LA rather than the UK or in Ireland.
Okay.
But the UK is still where most of my work is. I'm just trying to get a leg over the pond, if you like.
Yeah.
To be in, you know, I've been going to LA on and off for years. I think you have to be there for a sustained period of time. So we thought we'd make it a 2 or 3 year move. And we'd just been there 6-7 months when this all happened, so I've had to come back.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure what the future brings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might. What different, like in terms of, now I know it's still early doors in terms of your American adventure, but what differences so far have you noticed between working on American sets? I know you've directed some episodic TV over there, comparatively to British or Irish sets.
The stakes are higher, so the budgets are higher. There's more money. There's huge crews, and you can't do what you want. I mean, when you're directing episodes of, particularly in comedy, when you're directing episodes of somebody else's show, you kind of fit in and do the house style, and you can bring a certain je ne sais quoi or something to certain bits of it. And if you have ideas to explore, they'll hear them out. But for the most part, you're there to just get the thing shot. But to that end, if you know what you're doing, they will entertain, you know, I need 3 cameras on this, I need a crane on this, and that's not a problem. Shooting stuff in the UK, particularly comedy, for some reason, commissioners in the UK feel comedy is slightly subservient to drama, so drama always gets the heftier budgets and comedy never does. So I find in America that's not the case. The comedy is revered and respected, because those big shows like American Housewife and stuff like that, they've earned their audience and they cost a lot of money to make, and there's a reason for that, and they throw money at that stuff, you know. And so if you do need to go over time, if you do need to do this, if you do need, the facility is there. But so often in British shows in the last few years, we can't do that, we can't do that. What you got to do is we've got to shoot Sundays, we've got to shoot the 6th day every week. You know, there's less of everything to go around.
And in terms of you're kind of known as a comedy director. Do you think there's much of a difference? Are there different skills between comedy and drama as a director?
Yeah. I mean, so the American system, comedies are half hours, dramas are hours. So you tend to be a half-hour guy or you're 1 hour guy. And I've gone for some 1 hour work, and they've looked at you and go, well, you're kind of a half-hour guy.
Yeah.
You know, we see you more as a half-hour guy.
Yeah.
And so it's slightly patronizing, because it's like you can't retain that much more stuff in your head. I mean, the half-hour comedies, because they come from the tradition of sitcom, which came from the tradition of theater, really, because it's staged with like a proscenium arch to be shot on 3 or 4 cameras and to be viewed by an audience. Comedy still has some of that stuff attached to it. The remnants of that way of working is still attached to certain comedy projects and directors. So you tend to be seen as a comedy person rather than a drama person. However, the way comedy is going, and particularly with streamers comedy and HBO comedy, so much of the comedy is becoming quite dramatic. The last TV thing I've done is a show for Apple. It comes out in August, and it's called Ted Lasso. And Oh shit, who's Jason Sudeikis? Yeah, and so that was meant to be a comedy, but I just looked at the last cut that I got sent last night, and it's actually become quite dramatic. I mean, there are laughs in it, but there's a lot of drama in it. So I think the new sort of comedy in America is blurring the lines between comedy and drama, and a lot of the shows are 40 minutes rather than, network half hours are only 22 minutes. Streaming half hours are about a half hour, but streamers now making 40-minute shows, which is more like an hour in drama, if you like, in network TV, because an hour is only 42 minutes.
Yeah, well, I guess they're a little bit more freeform now, especially with streaming. Like Fincher, I suppose, was one of the first to kind of mess around with the structure in terms of timing and pacing and stuff. I think it was over that with House of Cards initially, I think. Fucking with the paradigm, as it were. Let's talk about the massive elephant in your room all the time. How did Father Ted come to you? And
so I'd gone to the UK after Eurovision and did music TV in London for a few years, but was itching to do comedy, and I got a break on a show that was a spin-off from the Commitments movie. And it was called Over the Rainbow. Angeline Ball and Brona Gallagher were the characters from the Commitments, and they'd gone to England and set up and started a band, and they were like a budding pub band. So I got a break doing a comedy, and it wasn't bad. And after that I got to do Joe Brand for a while, and then I heard Graham and Arthur were doing a show called Paris with Alexi Sale, and I met them for that. And I think they were interested in me, but I think they got talked out of me and went with a more experienced director. And then Paris didn't work out very well. They just did one season, and then they got Father Ted away, and they wanted to see me again. And I think they recognized in the at least a fellow Irish person who would be maybe more in tune with their comedy than a British TV comedy director would, perhaps.
Do you think that would have been the case?
I think it required a certain sensibility, and luckily they had found Jeremy. Oh God, what's our lovely producer called? Sorry, season one. Sorry, I'll come back to me in a second. Luckily they found Jeffrey Perkins. Luckily they found Jeffrey, and Jeffrey knew what they had and was very keen to protect them. Jeffrey worked at Channel 4 then, or Hat Trick. And he produced the first series, and he was just bloody brilliant with them and protected them. And I think they were the right thing to pick an Irish director. Obviously, I think it required a sensibility that somebody over there might have been able to get. They knew I could tune into their humor. They didn't have to explain quite so much.
Yeah, they were relying on a shorthand.
Yeah, and they did create a new sort of thing. It was a new world that no one had done before. And so the instincts, the Irish instincts might be to go quite big on it, and they were pulling that down, whereas the British instincts would be to go a different way, and they were pulling away from that. So I think having an Irish person in the mix helped them.
And did you get, because as you said, it hadn't really been done before, did you get it straight away, or did it take you a little bit to get into the world?
I got it straight away. I got the bigger picture, but the nuance was constantly evolving. And, if Graham and Arthur felt stuff was getting too big, it was, stuff would get too big, and actors would come in having a right laugh and think they could be funny and everything,
Right.
But because Dermot and Ardle were the funny guys and had the comedian eye to things, very often actors have to work at being funny, whereas comedians have to work at acting. Yeah. And I think Dermot and Ardle were desperately trying to act, and the comedians were desperately trying to be funny, and the comedians tended to have more success, I think. So I think a lot of the actors would try and get very big with it, and Graham and Arthur would be there pulling that down. So we're just finding that tone when you've never done it before. It's not immediately obvious.
Okay. Did you have a say? Did you have a say in casting, generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I was part of that whole process with them, and I knew Dermot from RTE because I'd done a show with them at RTE. And I think, for him, it was nice to have a face there that he knew. I mean, he so wanted the show, bless him. He was so focused on getting that show and so thrilled that he did. Ardle, I just didn't understand Ardle. I'd never seen him before. And the guys just came, no, he's like a fucking rabbit in car headlights. That was the thing. And, as soon as he puts on the gear and does that, he is amazing. So, yeah, part of the casting of it, part of the whole setting up thing, finding the house. I remember the day we found the house. Joe Murdiff, I think, was the location guy who's driving around a field and clearing. Said there's a house in here I'd like to see. And what the amazing thing when you pulled up beside the house, there was no drive. You just couldn't figure out how you get to the house. It seemed to be surrounded by a wall and no visible path. And there was, but the grass was very long. You couldn't see it. But it was just it did look like someone had just gone, put a house there. You know, literally just a house stuck in a field.
Yeah, how did they ever get planning permission? Did you anticipate that it would be like that? It would have number one so much staying power over the years, but for it to be as successful as it's been, and part of the I suppose the Irish zeitgeist over the last 20 years, 25 years.
We had no idea, especially during the first season, because we just had no idea what it was until we put it together. And even then, it's what the fuck is this thing? And and they'd given us the go ahead to order another 10 episodes. Channel 4 had, so we started shooting the second season when the Baftas came up, and we won for the first series. And just the surge of confidence suddenly of going, this really works. They get it,
and especially,
I think series season 2 got so much madder.
Yeah, and that it worked both here and in the UK, I guess. That was
and in the UK, I mean, it was always intended to work in the UK because that's where they were paying for it. It was shot in front of a mainly British audience. That the situation should be universal enough to work anywhere, and I think there was just a belief from day one. It wasn't even an intention. It was like, no, this show has to work in the UK. Whereas I think if you'd made that show in Ireland, that wouldn't necessarily have been an ambition of the show to work outside. But it is still staggering that it's so revered and loved and cherished by people, and it's so fondly remembered.
Was there truth in the rumor that there was going to be an American remake, or was that?
I think they tried it a few times, and I think Steve Martin might have been attached to one version of it, but nothing's happened.
Yeah,
it's quite different, isn't it? I mean, their view of clergy and all that.
Yeah, it's hard to
a very
imagine.
Different world.
But I do remember being at TED Fest years ago, working at it and meeting Japanese people at it. They loved it, so it has some sort of universal appeal.
Well, I think, Jeremy, I did an interview for The Telegraph last week because apparently it was 25 years since the show started, or since the show first aired last week. And one of the things about, Dermot was a very nice man, and I think he brought humanity to TED.
Yeah.
And often when things were going awful for him, he was in trouble. It was like you were kind of seeing Dermot, and you knew you were seeing Dermot rather than an actor performing. And he was fucking lost sometimes, and he would be, he would just become the moment. And there was great humanity in that,
Could you talk a little bit about working with actors and the difference? You kind of touched on it there, comedians and actors, and there's a kind of an adage that comic actors are the best because if they're good comic actors, they can probably do drama as well, whereas it doesn't work the other way. Do you find that?
Well, I think they're all individuals, aren't they? I mean, Steve Coogan. His the memories tonight. What's the movie you did before Alpha Papa? Where he plays Martin, the journalist, Martin Six.
Philomena, yeah.
I mean, she's amazing, isn't she? But he is stunning in that. He is really, really good in that. Yeah. He's a fantastic actor, and a lot of Partridge is convincing you that the character is real. That's why it's so funny. You invest so much in that character when he does something that's stupid. You feel for him. Again, there's a lot of humanity there. But I think that's amazing performance on his part. It's so hard to know, isn't it? I mean, Jesus, they're all, but just great performers are great performers. I used to be terrified of actors, when I started getting into comedy first, because it just seemed to be they had their own kind of world. And I think what works in comedy is when you give people their space a bit, and when you don't over direct it. And I see comedy sometimes, and it's like it's been directed with a sledgehammer. It's fucking terrible. And so you can't over prescribe as a director unless you've created the thing and you have it. The other thing is so many comedies are the work of the actor creator. Steve Coogan's thing, the Idris Elba thing, the Jason Sudeikis thing. He created that show, and so they're coming from a place of going, here's what I want. Can you help me to get it? it's not like, in a drama, somebody else has written it and the director is the interpreter of the piece and casts the actors to fit into that hub, if you like. Whereas in some ways, the comedians are almost casting a director who they can work with.
Do you think? I've heard it said that kind of the comedic actor preparation scenario is very much like, they're rubbing their magic lamp, and nobody likes to have anybody walk in on them when they're rubbing their magic lamp.
Yeah, there is a bit of that, and when comedy is happening, especially if you've got two people and they're sparking off each other, it sometimes it's just, it all fucking happens and then it's over, and then you can't go again because you missed, you didn't get it, you missed it. You can't do 10 and 12 takes and stuff because you didn't like the camera move, you didn't like that kind of has to, the production and the technique has to take a backseat sometimes to comedy. And when comedy performers are firing 2 or 3 takes and you've got to move on because it just, there's no point, it just goes off the boil. Or
yeah, I'm assuming that your live performance directing and almost documentarian kind of approach.
It is a bit of that, and understanding where the gags are, so you're shooting the right things. Particularly with dialogue, and so often in comedy, I try and cross shoot dialogue. So if it's you and me talking, there's a camera on you and there's a camera on me at the same time. So you got to compromise the lighting and all that to do that. But it means when there's gold happening, you're getting the 2 people, you're getting it live. And so much of Alpha Papa in the siege room, all the hostages, so much of that is shot on 2 cameras, and the cameras are all over the fucking place. So no one really knows who's being shot half the time because the cameras are moving between them. And it makes the whole thing more spontaneous and live. And if you're in there in the middle of it with them and you go, someone's fluffed up, you just go back 3 lines. Actually, can you just grab him again and do that? And just, doing it all quickly and making it all feel live for the actors as well is kind of important. And going in there, we're going to shoot for an hour. So if I'm going to have a piss, do it now. But then we're going to shut the door. We're just going to shoot. And that's a great way to work. And I think a lot of comedians get off on that thing of just bang, 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 keep it moving and all that stuff. Unless it's not working, and then that was the other thing, but Steve, particularly on Alan Partridge. Oh, there's loads of people here.
Just between me and you and about 30 other people.
Because he'd literally come off Philomena before he started shooting Partridge, and he wasn't kind of on top of it. And the script, he hadn't spent enough time on the script. And I mean, after a few days, he wanted to stop because he thought it was going so badly. And we can't stop and stop. There's like 7 weeks shoot. We've got to keep going now. We're in. But there were times when you shoot the scene and he'd just go, you know what? This is terrible. And there's no way it's going to the film. So let's just not waste another 2 hours shooting it. I need to go sit with the writers for an hour. Can you shoot something else? Or can you and those guys go and shoot some cutaways? And there was no point in screaming and throwing your handbag out the window. It's just, that was the situation they had to deal with. And he was right.
Was that informed by the fact that he might have felt as if Partridge was a bit of an albatross at that point?
No, but he did email me very late one night saying, we have to stop shooting. This needs to be gold. If there's anything less than gold, I will be crucified by the critics. They will crucify me. It was Partridge was such a special thing for him. Yeah. And it's been untainted. They haven't fucked it up yet, Partridge. And he's constantly just trying to protect that.
Yeah. And so you must be pretty nimble then as a director if you were able to do that.
Well, you have to be a bit, and again, coming out of TV helps, you have TV, shooting comedy isn't a luxury. You're shooting 6 or 8 pages a day easily. And the same in LA, you still have to shoot that many pages a day. You just have more things to shoot with. But TV shooting, having to shoot fast on TV helps you develop those skills a bit, I guess. And not being, I don't get hung up on minutiae and detail that I don't think is important. And in a drama, maybe that's very different, and you do obsess about things. But the things to obsess about in comedy are hand props, especially if something's supposed to get a laugh. If I got to pick that bottle up and the top is supposed to fly off, I, as an actor, can't be thinking if I squeeze it a bit more, it'll happen. It's just got to happen. Those things, when you're doing funny things like that, that shit has to be perfect for actors. But apart from that, I don't really obsess about, maybe that bit was out of focus, or shit, the camera wobbled, or the camera's moving a bit, or go with what's important and getting laughs. If you're laughing at the take, that's that's.
I mean, if you're laughing ostensibly, it is going to be funny for an audience, right?
A good sign, yeah.
I might open it up. We have a couple of questions here on the right from people that are watching. You don't mind answering
No.
a few of those, do you?
No.
I suppose we'll start with was Dermot the number one actor to play Father Ted, or were there other actors in the mix for the main?
We saw other people.
parts?
We saw other people definitely, but Dermot had it. Just had the thing, you know. It was almost like it was written for him. I mean, I know they had him in mind anyway, and you know, for the trendy. I don't know if you remember that. You're probably too young.
Scrap Saturday.
Scrap Saturday.
Oh yeah, Scrap Saturday. But I think Dermot just had that comedy edge.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have Mairead Kenny there. Who's your favourite overall Father Ted character?
Oh gosh, no. Because I know my favorite episode is Hell. Oh, and Noel Furlong's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah.
Can I just show you something?
Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
It was my birthday the other day, and someone commissioned and got this made for me.
Oh wow!
Oh, the exploding cow!
Yeah.
Oh, far away.
And the caravan. And the
That's
little cow.
amazing.
So small.
Oh, near and far away. Yeah.
Far away. Yeah. So that's my favorite episode. Yeah, Noel Furlong. That's the first time we met him doing Riverdance in the caravan, which is why it fell over.
There was a good bit of kind of stunty kind of setup. You know, was that fun?
Yeah, that's great fun to do, and that was also what made it quite different as a sitcom. You know, most sitcoms are shot only in the studio with maybe a few exterior shots, very little in the line of stunts or tricks or silly things. But we would do the craziest things in the studio, like the time when the roof fell in. You know, we had to have pipes leaking water on the set the whole way through live. You know, and then clean it up and go again in front of an audience. Trying to do that sort of thing in front of the audience. You know, I think we paint Dougal a different color one night. You know, just things that take a lot of time. Mrs. Doyle falling out the window, the priest jumping out the window. So often we'd record in the studio, we'd record those things before the audience come in. And then when the audience is there on the night, you play the tape in just at that moment. The audience are watching it mainly on the monitors anyway, and they see that happen. It's fucking amazing. So that they always got such big laughs. But I think just to get that physical in a sitcom was unusual. And again, that was a big thing from Graham and Arthur. It was something that it was like they were huge Simpsons fans, and that whole thing of the quick cutaway. You know, there's no way he's going to come here. Shrimp, he's on the way here. Shrimp, straight back. Fuck. Those quick cutaway things they weren't done in British comedy or an Irish comedy at that point, and that was what made the show so different as well. It was one of those things, and great fun to do.
I suppose on the strength of the success of Ted, some other doors opened up in terms of some other fantastic shows over the years. What have been some highlights in terms of, number one, the show, the experience, or maybe some actors that you've worked with? You know, Paul Whitehouse being one, probably.
Well, right after Ted, I did Cold Feet. I did the pilot for a show called Cold Feet. And the pilot sat there for 6 or 8 months, and suddenly it won the Golden Rose of Montreux, and ITV eventually screened it, and they commissioned the series. So I went off and did some of that. I loved doing Cold Feet. It was a seminal show. It was a 1 hour show as well. It was very different to Ted, but again, just a huge crowd pleaser. And I loved working with Jimmy Nesbitt on that. It was Jimmy. I'd suggested Jimmy for that. I'd met him socially, and I'd seen him doing an ad for Purcell the night before I went in for my meeting. And it was a husband washing the dishes, which in 1995 was an unusual thing to see, I guess. And I thought, oh, Jimmy, he's great. So yeah, he got into Cold Feet. Paul Whitehouse was I loved Paul Whitehouse. I did 2 seasons of a show called Happiness with him. And then we went on to do a show called Help, which was a 2-hander between him and Chris Langham. Chris Langham played a therapist, and Paul played 35 different characters who were patients.
Brilliant.
Tons of prosthetics and stuff. And it was brilliant because we could only shoot, he couldn't, just because so much of the show was him, he would only shoot 2 days a week, 3 days a week. So we just left the set standing. I would go in and out of the studio and then do a rehearsal day before we go back into the studio and shit. I love doing that. And we won a Bafta for that. Oh gosh, what else have I done? I mean, I like everything I do. I mean, Ted and Cold Feet were definitely way up there in terms of you know, having an impact and lasting. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of those other shows disappear. I mean, the Coogan collaboration is something I'm absolutely thrilled with. I love that movie. I think it's really well done. I think the jokes are well hit.
Yeah, very much so. I rewatched it.
Laugh rate.
I watched it when it came out, and then I rewatched it the other night, just in preparation for this, and I found myself laughing quite organically a couple of seconds after each gag when it landed.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And that's a good thing, which means it's rewatchable and rewatchable.
It's kind of surprising that.
I watched it last week.
Sorry.
There was a thing on over here. There was the Norfolk Film Festival, which will be cancelled, did a live Twitter showing. So everyone watched it at 8 o'clock, and then you tweet the whole way through it. Okay. That's young people were doing it anyway. But yeah, it's funny. It's a very funny film. And Coogan is.
It's funny that you say that he was kind of struggling at the start, because it looks quite like everyone was having fun on it.
Yeah, everyone was having far too much fun. They wrote 125 pages, you know, and we ended up with an 89-minute film. It could have been 30 pages shorter. We could have saved ourselves 2 weeks of shooting if they hadn't written so much extra stuff that really wasn't very good.
How did Colin Meaney come to be involved in that?
We tried around. It was over Christmas. We weren't getting anywhere, and suddenly someone said he'd come off something else that was available. And he was fucking great, because he's quite dark and adds a lot of, you know, anchors the show. You know, so Steve could be daft and silly, but he was the real character in the show, and had quite an emotional storyline, and I thought he rooted that whole thing really well. You know, I think it was difficult for him to be the straight guy, because he wasn't really allowed to be funny. He couldn't be funny because that didn't work for the story. But Steve could be a fucking idiot because that worked for the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was hard for him to be there with other people, you know, getting the pratfalls and doing all the funny stuff, and him just having to be miserable the whole time, because that's what his character was, you know.
Sorry there, I'm having a bit of a delay.
Do you agree with Johnny Depp's assertion that Paul Whitehouse is one of the best actors in the world?
Yes, I think Paul could do any bloody thing, and he is over here. He's something of a national treasure. I just think he's brilliant.
There's a
quick Johnny Depp story. Johnny Depp wanted to make The Ginger Man a few years ago and shoot it in Ireland, so we played around with that for about 2 years. And Cillian Murphy was going to be the Ginger Man, and we went down to Westmeath and met Dunleavy and stuff like that. And sadly, it just didn't all happen. And Dunleavy has died since, and I think it's probably a project whose time has come and gone.
And you've had projects fall apart like a week before shooting.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Yes. I try not to ever let it happen again, you know. You know, but it does happen. I mean, I think it happens less and less, and it's less of a miracle for a film to get made. I mean, 20 years ago in Ireland, it was a fucking miracle to get a film made. You know, and at the last possible moment, things did collapse. But now there's so much need for content, and there's so much money available for content. The whole thing is geared up massively, you know, and gone up a couple of notches, I think. So things get made these days. I think that thing of things falling apart doesn't happen quite so much.
Maybe I might try and entice you into the RTE comedy debate over the last kind of 10 years. Is there anybody over the last kind of years creating content in this country who you really like, or you think has chops to go on and do something fantastic?
I'm not au fait with all the stuff, I would have to say. I used to love Bachelor's Walk. That's probably 10 years ago, isn't it?
Ironically, it's been screened at the moment again. But
that thing that Jennifer, I've worked with her a few times. What's her name? She's fucking great.
Jennifer Zamparelli.
Yeah, the one who said to my the Ryanair guy. So, Michael, how does it feel to be the biggest prick in Ireland? Michael O'Leary. They said that to him live on TV. How does it feel to be the biggest prick in Ireland? She's fantastic, and she had a funny show.
Bridget and Eamon.
You know, I barely. Yes, that one. I saw a little bit of Graham's show. No, not flat. No, I don't know. I'm in and out, and I don't see that stuff very much. I can't see the RTI player. The player doesn't work
Oh,
out
really?
here, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest travesties
Some
of the
things
service
work,
is that
but yeah, it's well, BBC doesn't work here either. So
I mean, it's very difficult for RT. Comedy was never, up there years ago, and the last 10 years, 15 years, they really tried to put that right and spent money on it and hired people and done all that stuff. It's just really hard to get it right. And there's so little comedy coming out of RT that everything is really scrutinized. There's maybe 50 comedies in the UK every year, and half a dozen that are really, really good. There's a lot of shit. And American comedies, we see the very best of. There's so much that's rubbish. So it is quite hard to keep up that, to get a high hit rate, So, for RT to have any success at all in comedy is not easy.
you had to leave Ireland, or did you feel you had to leave to make it?
Went away.
Went away for a weekend.
No, I in the run up to the Eurovision Song Contest, I became quite big-headed about the whole thing, and Declan Lynch did an interview with me for the Sunday Independent, and they sent me over to the canteen to do the interview with him. No minder, no one. And I just laid into the whole fucking thing. I thought Eurovision was an awful, awful carry-on, to be honest. It's not about the music. It's about a bunch of TV executives from all over Europe coming to Ireland, going on a piss up. It's not about the music. No one cares about the music. So I was saying it's a shame because the music is what it's meant to be about. It's meant to be about the songs, and it's not. It's about all the razzmatazz. And he kind of fucking printed it word for word, and there was a lot of swearing, and he hadn't rubbed it out or anything like that. It just looked fucking awful. It looked awful. I came across as a complete dickhead. And this was like 10 days before the show. And it was that weekend when all the entrants were starting to arrive flying into Dublin. And I'd been very nasty about the British entrant. So it was awful. A lot of the crew said they wouldn't want to work on the show. There was a move to get me off it, but it was so close to transmission that it would have been very hard for someone else to step in and take it on. So the producer, Lee Miller, and it was quite a humbling and brilliant experience for me, made me come around to every department head and meet them and say, I apologize for what I did. I was very naive and stupid of me, blah, blah, blah. Your department, my department, we don't work together. And I tell you, it was amazing, the atmosphere after that, because everyone just said, well, he fucked up and he's apologized. And everyone kind of got behind me, really, and the show was brilliant.
That's wonderful. I might just ask you one or two questions there, just in terms of commercial.
So after that, I left RT because I was kind of, went to London literally a few weeks after that and didn't come back.
Did you feel you had to?
Can I?
It wasn't that I had to, but I don't think I could have gone back into RT. I don't think I wanted to go back to RT after that, to be honest.
Just a couple of questions there, just coming in. Do you have any interest in working Osceola?
No, but I was going to start tonight in Irish and pretend that I thought this whole thing was meant to be in Irish just to see how you'd cope with it.
Not very well. Hard enough communicating in English.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. Depends what it's about, I guess, and what it is. But I do love a bit of Irish, and having not living in Ireland anymore, you do love to hear a bit of it every now and then.
Do you think there's much benefit to up-and-coming directors to do spec commercials to try and shine a light in there?
I mean, when I was doing it in 1974, 1975, it was Super 8 film. It was really hard to do. It was really expensive. Now everyone's got a fucking phone, and you got your Mac, and you can shoot stuff and edit stuff. And so it's very democratic. So anybody if you got the talent, now you have a better chance of being able to show it off than I think I did.
So if you don't have the talent, don't bother your arse, essentially.
Well, you don't know that until you start shooting stuff and making stuff, do you? It's just that it's never been easier to try. It's never been easier to do something, and it has a kind of separating the wheat from the chaff a bit, isn't it? A lot of people talk about it, but no one fucking doing it. Just go and do it.
Yeah. Do you have any words of wisdom that you'd give yourself, kind of starting out around 17, 18, before you get on the roller coaster?
I was obsessive about detail. I was very OCD about my work in those days, and it made me quite a boring person and obsessing about all the wrong fucking things. And starting to work in comedy, I learned to just lighten up and loosen up.
So you're a very different director now.
Yeah. Definitely less anal and less obsessed about just putting that thing. Actually, just move that over there. There we go. No, better. That's it's not any funnier, is it?
Yeah.
You know, the cameraman's fucking around with the light for a minute. You go, you know what, guys? It hasn't gotten any funnier since he moved the lights. We just shoot it.
Yeah.
Is it part of your job to like create a good atmosphere for comedy to kind of
Yes. Yeah. I mean, God, I've walked on some people's sets, and it's like going to a wake or something. Not a wake, a funeral. Anyway, you just sense a terrible atmosphere. You know, there's a lot of shouting. Well, it doesn't happen so much anymore, but a lot of shouting used to go on. A lot of arguing. You can't be doing all that, really. You know, it's not conducive to having a laugh and having a good atmosphere on set is really, really important. As long as everyone's getting the work done and you got that thing taken away.
It would be remiss of me not to ask you about what it was like working with Robert De Niro on that ad that you did for Warburton's.
He was great. I mean, we'd had a couple of phone calls, a couple of big phone calls with 10 people on the phone, his agent and him, and you got his stylist in New York, and you got the script guys in London, and Jonathan Warburton was even on one of the calls with him. Jonathan has to always meet and vet the actor before he buys into the idea, and it costs a lot of money. So he always wants to have a phone call or a face-to-face with the actor before we do it. But he got the idea, and he'd seen the one with Stallone. We'd done 4 in the series, and Stallone was in the first one, and so he'd seen that. I think he might even have spoken to Stallone about it. But he said, "I like what you did with Sly. That he was taking the piss out of himself. He was, and he didn't say it like that. He said it in his accent, but." And so then I had another call to go through the script in more detail with him. And I think, he obviously got paid a lot of money. I don't think he did it because he loves the bagels so much. But he bought into the idea, and he really liked the reverence that we showed to... The script was very reverential in its references. And the references were smart. They were intelligent references. And the visual... references were cleverly done, and they were honorable and reverential and respectful and all that sort of shit. I think that makes a huge difference. I think there's so much of that old bollocks that they get fed that when they feel they're getting the real thing, they like that and respect that. And he was so cooperative.
It's a really good looking ad, isn't it?
It looks lovely.
It's a beautiful ad.
He's only there for 20 hours. I had 2 days with him for 10 hours a day. So everything was shot in and around a warehouse in London. We shot a lot of it with blue screen, and then we went to Bolton and shot all the exteriors to match the camera moves in London. So I mean, we even got a rainy day. We were blessed. So I mean, making it look miserable, he was up for all that, and he was just very easy to deal with. I had a double for him. I would block the scene with the double. I would rehearse it on the camera. I'd record that, and then I'd bring Bob on the set and say, "Here's what's going to happen." He said, "Yeah, let's do that." Or he'd go, "I don't want to stand there. Can I do that? I think I might sit down for this bit." But overall, he was just, a geezer.
Nice. That's good to hear. We usually end kind of our podcast, generally speaking, with how
a song.
Yeah, we do it. We do a jazz hands dancey number. Just how. One note that a lot of aspiring filmmakers, which seems to be beneficial for them, is how people of a certain level of perceived success deal with rejection. How do you deal with rejection from a mindfulness point of view, more so, but also, just in general terms?
If it's something that I really wanted to do, or something that's important to me, or I needed the money, I take the rejection quite badly, actually. I get a bit bitchy about it, and then you find out who did get it. You go, fucking, he got it. I mean, look at this stuff. It's rubbish.
I love it. Brilliant.
I am a bit bitter about things, but for the most part, I get the things that I really, really love. I've been very lucky to have got them. I mean, I'm going through that in America because I'm getting rejected for most stuff. A middle-aged white man is probably one of the hardest things to sell in Hollywood right now. It's true. It's just it is. We had it very good for a long time, so it's time we had to work a bit harder at it. But I think when all this finishes, hopefully, if it all finishes, I think there's going to be a sudden rush of work everywhere because people desperately want stuff. So I think it's a good time to get work by default.
I might ask you quickly just about recognition, or in terms of winning awards. What does it mean to somebody like you to have your work recognized and to get the nod to win? Obviously, some BAFTAs like that.
the BAFTAs matter a huge amount. You know, they're always on your resume, and everybody knows what a BAFTA is. BAFTAs and the Emmys in TV, they seem to be the two. You know, and I got nominated 6 times for BAFTAs and won twice. I'd love to win a third one, but. And 2 of the shows, Moon Boy and Little Britain, both won Emmys. But the Emmys, the director doesn't get them. They go to the producer and the actors, weirdly, because they have a separate directing Emmy, whereas BAFTA doesn't have a comedy directing Emmy, BAFTA. So the director and the producer gets them. But it's a fantastic thing, and it's important for your career, and you know it always stands out on a CV, the resume, doesn't it? If someone's won a few awards.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah,
obviously.
It does help, and I suppose in America as well. Do you think? Is it? I guess it helps you stand out.
Yeah, because they don't read stuff particularly. They don't look at stuff, but they just go, he's got 2 BAFTAs, he got 2 Emmys. That's know, it's shorthand for he's not as bad as the other fuckers that we saw.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, best look. Like, was it a hard decision to make to go there, or did it just kind of naturally lead you there?
Well, it's risky financially, you know, and we only half moved there because we kept the house here because 2 of my boys are here and my wife was coming and going, and I was coming back to London to shoot commercials. But our teenage daughter, she started high school over there, so it was like if we didn't go then, it'd be awkward to take her out of school here, start a year later. So we just spent an awful lot of money getting there and being there, only to turn around and come home. So I can't wait to get back. So yes, let's see what happens in the meantime. But maybe I'll work here for a while before I go back or something. You know, I'm lucky to be able to work there and work here.
Is it any if any do end up working there? What's like, you know, any advice for how do you manage LA?
Get in the union and get an agent. You know, you have to be in the DGA, and they pay so much better over there than they do here. It's a big part of the draw, I'm afraid. And get an agent. You have to have an agent because no one will see you without an agent, and it's hard to get the agent. It's one of those things. It's hard to get an agent without doing a gig. So you need to have done good comedy work here, and you need to have a showreel going over there and say, "Here's a couple of episodes of thing. Here's a short I did," and you will get an agent if you're good. You will get an agent. They're always looking for directors.
Brilliant.
Okay, I think we've taken up 3 more minutes of your time than was agreed previously. So really appreciate this time, and I think.
Thank you very much. I haven't really been looked at the questions coming in there, but
feel free if you want to. If there's any that you want to answer there, we'll ask you maybe one more from the guys about VFX. Blue screen, green screen. How do you feel about them generally speaking as a director?
Well, a bit like actors. You know, a couple of years ago, I was terrified of effects, and I was terrified of actors. And then you get to work with actors and realize actually they're quite nice. And at the end of the day, they're bringing their tools to the job, but their tools are themselves. You know, and you just have to learn to work with their thing, like you work with the DP, who's a camera and a light meter. You know, it's just. And so VFX, it's, you know, you just need to know in advance what you're doing. You need to know what you want it to look like. You need to have had meetings and spent, you know, done sessions with the VFX people before you shoot. It's just about talking beforehand. And then you hope they're flexible on the day, because some of them are fuckers and they're a bit Nazi-like in their prescriptive direction. It has to be like this and this and this. But some of them, you know, you go, that was really, really funny. I know the thing came into shot. If he can get rid of that, yeah, it's fine. There's a guy at the mill, Barnsley at the mill over here, who's brilliant like that, and I get him on all my jobs. So he did The Wizard of Halifax, which I mean, I'm still not quite sure how we did that, but we put the guy.
That's right. Yeah. It's incredible. Oh, that was you.
I mean, that's really well done. It's just painstakingly done, but I learned so much from those guys doing that. Again, it's at the end of the day, the effects are only good if the performance is good. And so it's about making the performer comfortable working on a big empty screen with nothing around him or whatever, giving him things. So in The Wizard of Oz, even though we only shot one character, we had 3 other actors dressed in costume off camera for that actor to work with. And a few times you saw over their shoulder, you got the back of their head. So it was brilliant that we had the other actors there for that actor. So the whole thrust of that was about getting the performance right. And then the VFX people made it fit in beautifully.
So it's a tool like any other, but you need to know how to use it.
It is. Yeah. It is about preparation. Is
Yeah.
so important. Fucking talk and talk and talk about it. That is worth talking about. You know, so you don't have all that on the set because you haven't.
I'll just ask you one more question. How important is it to be a nice guy working in this industry?
I think it's awfully important. You also don't want people to walk all over you. So there is a kind of thing. People, you know, a lot of crews just like to have a light time at the end of the day. You know, it's a job for a lot of people. You know, and so you know, if they think they can get away with shit, people will also try and take the piss. I think it's important to be nice because I think, you know, if you got a bunch of people around you who you like and you love them and they love you and you're all making the same film, then that can be a fantastic buzz. I know that's going to have to change a bit in the future because there can't be so many of us, perhaps. But that is that family thing that happens on the set is brilliant. And when people give their most when they feel it's been you know, what they're doing is liked and loved and that they're appreciated. I think appreciating people is what's so important.
Motivate, not cajole or berate.
Yeah, and not micromanaging and, you know, tweaking endlessly.
Like me, like us. We better wrap it up. Thanks so much for your time, and believe me when I say, people really do appreciate these sessions and people reaching out and giving their time. You know, especially to up and coming filmmakers, actors, directors, producers. Yeah. They do, and we hear it all the time. So it's really, really, really valuable. So thank you for your time.
And listen, well done. Thank you guys for doing it. It's a fantastic initiative, and I think it's brilliant that you guys do it. And I hope you get some of the recognition.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Declan.
Cheers, Declan. Continued success. I'm sure you're smash it and get the big American comedy show that you want. No doubt. Good things happen to good people, and stay safe. And I hope everybody's doing well your end. Thanks a lot,
lads.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey, Paulie.
Hey.
Okay, we're still live to an audience.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. That was great fun. And thanks for all the questions. Really good questions. Sorry we didn't get to get through all of them. But yeah, I think it was a great chat. What a gent.
Yeah. You know, one thing, as I've said dozens of times before, even about doing the podcast, is that people are genuinely very nice. You know, successful people. And I think once you get rid of that kind of Goliath complex when you're talking to people, you realize that everybody is kind of the same. He's another example of that. You know.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Like, you know, and if anyone deserved to be a bit cocky or whatever, it would be him. You mentioned work he's done, but he's not like that at all.
Yeah, and we'll also probably be putting this out either as a video or maybe as a podcast as well. So if you came late to the conversation, keep an eye out, and we will be head over to our Facebook group and Facebook page, Facebook.com/Film Network Ireland, and we'll be sticking either of those up in the next couple of days. So keep an eye on that. For next week, for those of you still watching, and there's a few of you there, we'll be interviewing similarly Frank Berry at 7 o'clock next Wednesday. That's the 5th or the 6th. Let me just double check that. The 6th.
The 6th, yeah.
And we'll be chatting all things independent filmmaking and about his particularly about his two features over the last couple of years. Michael Inside, which I believe to be probably the best Irish feature of the last 5 or 10 years.
I would agree.
Just purely because it won't leave you alone. afterwards, which is always the mark of a really great film. So yeah, tune in for that next week. And we also, Paul, we have something really cool happening next Tuesday. Who are we interviewing next for the podcast?
We're going to be interviewing Lenny Emerson. Finally, we've been trying to get him for a while. Busy man. It's very hard to get people when they're in such intense post-production schedules and that. So great to have him give us his time. So yeah, if anyone has questions, let us know and we will try and get through them for the podcast.
Yeah, if you want to, there's a couple of posts on the social networking pages. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to just ask directly. To post those questions, and we'll try and get them in. We've, as Paul said, we've been trying to get Lenny for ages. But I have to say, it's very important that Lenny said very, very early on that he will do the podcast, like a year ago. So that's again another example of how sound somebody in his position is. It's just very much a case of getting the work monkeys off his back, as it were, before he can do stuff like this.
Yeah, and just fitting in time. One of the good things about this is, just being able to do it on Skype frees people up a little bit. So we really appreciate people doing it. And, obviously we'd love to be in our lovely studio with lovely sound. But that's not possible. So thanks for being forgiven and still tuning into the podcast.
Mm-hmm. We do our best to try and tidy that up, and we do have a sound engineer working on the post now in Stephen Bedford. So yeah, thanks a million for that, Steve, for helping us try to make sense of to unknot the yarn and wool, as it were, in terms of sound. So we really appreciate that. If you haven't been already, if you go to the networking icon on the left there beside Paul's box, you can chat to everybody. Paul's box. You can chat to everybody else that's involved. There's some people still involved, and otherwise we shall see you next week for the same thing again, with some great people coming up for the remainder of lockdown every week on Wednesdays. So yeah, take it easy. Thanks a million for getting involved, and thanks to Paul for co-hosting tonight.
Thank you. All right, bye everyone.
See you. Thanks guys. Bye bye.